Have you ever found out something you've owned your whole life was secretly worth a fortune? 3 years ago, I moved into a crumbling lakefront cabin I'd inherited from my grandfather. The kind of place most people would call a teardown. I called it freedom. My name's Thomas Harrington, 56 years old, recently divorced, and happily retired from a soul-draining career in engineering. I came to Maplewood Lake to disappear, to fish, to read, to breathe. I didn't come here looking for a fight, but sometimes the fight comes to you with bulldozers. First, it was just the usual HOA nonsense. The Sunny Shores Homeowners Association didn't like my dock, said the weathered wood didn't fit their community aesthetic. They sent letters. I ignored them. Then they said my mailbox was the wrong shade of brown. I told them to buy me a can of paint if it mattered so much. The back and forth became a strange sort of routine. But all of that changed when Bradley Vincent became HOA president. Bradley was the kind of man who wore a three-piece suit to a board meeting and smiled like he'd just bought your house out from under you. He used to be a big-shot real estate developer in Chicago, until some accounting irregularities chased him out of the city. Maplewood was supposed to be his fresh start, and apparently mine was in his way. Bradley's grand vision: turn our quiet tree-lined lake into a luxury resort. Not a metaphorical resort, a real one. A marina, a lakeside event center, a beach club, even talks of a golf course. Maplewood will be the Hamptons of Minnesota, he told the local paper. The homeowners clapped. I stared into my coffee mug. Then one morning I looked out from my dock and saw a barge floating in my cove. Men were driving pilings into the lake bed, extending the community dock into what had always been undisturbed water beside my land. No warning, no courtesy. Just construction noise and diesel fumes. I stormed over to the site and found Bradley there, gesturing at blueprints and pretending not to hear me. This is my cove, I said. You can't just build here. He smiled without looking up. The lake belongs to everyone, Tom. Your property ends at the shoreline. I wanted to deck him. Instead, I walked away. But something in his smug certainty didn't sit right. That evening, for the first time since inheriting the place, I dug out the old cedar chest my grandfather had left in the attic. I'd ignored it for years. Inside were bundles of papers, deeds, letters, a faded fishing license from 1943. I wasn't sure what I was looking for. I just knew I needed something to push back with. And then I found it. At the bottom, wrapped in wax paper and tied with string, was a single yellow document. A water rights covenant dated 1897. My great-grandfather had granted the county permission to build an access road through his land in exchange for something extraordinary: exclusive riparian water rights to Maplewood Lake. Not the land, the water, not shared rights, not usage privileges. Ownership. Actual legal, unmodified ownership. My hands trembled as I read it. The signatures were clear. The language, formal but unmistakable. Any commercial use of the lake required the Harrington family's written consent, and it had never been transferred, amended, or revoked. Bradley had just built half a resort on water he didn't own, and he had absolutely no idea. The morning after I found the water rights covenant, I didn't bother making coffee. I barely slept. I was running on adrenaline and spite. I drove straight into town, gripping the envelope of documents like it was a live grenade. The Victorian house at the end of Main Street still had the old brass plaque on the porch. Daniel Hawthorne, attorney at law. I'd known Daniel in passing. He helped with the property transfer when my grandfather passed, but we hadn't spoken since. That was about to change. His receptionist looked up as I stepped inside. Do you have an appointment? I shook my head. He'll want to see this. Daniel was in his office, peering through wire-rimmed glasses at some thick volume of land use law. When I dropped the envelope on his desk, he gave me a practiced smile, until he opened it. His expression shifted from polite interest to something much sharper. Where did you get this? My grandfather's attic. It was with the deed to the cabin. He leafed through the covenant slowly, then pulled out a magnifying glass from his drawer to examine the signatures. The room smelled of pipe tobacco and old wood. It suddenly felt like the center of the universe. This is extraordinary, Thomas, he said at last. pushing his glasses higher on his nose. I mean, this is real. Very real. This covenant predates the formation of the county's modern water management district. It grants your family exclusive riparian rights to the lake, across all commercial activity. In plain English. He leaned back in his chair and steepled his fingers. You control who uses the lake. Not just who docks a boat or casts a line, but who makes money off it. And the HOA? They've built half a resort on top of your water. I sat there stunned. Is it still valid? After all this time? Daniel nodded. Water rights don't expire like a driver's license. Not unless they're sold, transferred, or explicitly abandoned. Your family's ownership of the shoreline, and the fact that you've continued to use the lake, even just for personal fishing, means you've maintained the rights by law. I suddenly felt like the air in the room had changed. Daniel began scanning and photocopying the documents, already muttering legal phrases to himself. Quiet title, injunction, preliminary relief. His mind was 5 steps ahead of mine, which suited me fine. I just needed to know what this meant. Can we stop them? We can do more than stop them, he said, his eyes gleaming. They've built on something they don't own. Every penny they've spent on docks, construction, event planning, it's all a liability. And now you hold the key. I left his office in a daze. As I drove back to the cabin, Maplewood Lake looked different. Not in appearance. The water still shimmered under the spring sun, and the loons still called from across the cove. But now I saw it for what it was. Leverage. Power. When I got home, I grabbed my binoculars and scanned the far side of the lake. Construction crews were swarming like ants, installing what looked like the foundation for an outdoor stage. A sign nearby read, "Future site of the Sunny Shores Lakeside Amphitheater." I laughed out loud. They had no idea. That evening, I got an unexpected knock on my screen door. Martha Caldwell stood there, cane in one hand, a folded envelope in the other. At 78, she still had the posture and poise of someone who ran things. And indeed, she had been the town clerk for over 3 decades. "I heard you were asking about the old water rights," she said, settling into my porch chair before I could even offer it. "How'd you hear that?" "This town," she replied with a smile. "News spreads faster than construction dust." We sat in silence for a moment as she watched the lake. Then she pulled a faded photograph from the envelope. It showed my grandfather in 1965, standing beside the cabin, holding the very same covenant I had found. Proud, solemn, a protector of something sacred. "He always said that paper would matter someday," Martha said softly. "When the right kind of wrong came along." She told me that back when the original HOA formed in the early 2000s, my grandfather had considered asserting the water rights, but the board back then promised to keep the lake natural. No development, no marinas, no commercial ventures. He'd believe them. He'd be heartbroken to see the circus now, she added, gesturing toward the growing skyline of scaffolding across the water. I looked at the photo again. My grandfather, younger than I'd ever seen him, but with the same stubborn set to his jaw I recognized in the mirror. "Then maybe it's time I used that paper." Before she left, Martha gave me a hug. "Just remember," she whispered, "you're not just protecting the lake for yourself. You're protecting what it's meant to be." The next morning, I woke to another announcement on the HOA's community message board. A glossy flyer touting the grand opening celebration of the Sunny Shores Resort, 3 months away. Live music, food trucks, a fireworks show over the lake. Over my lake. They thought the lake was theirs. They thought I was just the oddball in the old cabin, too quiet to fight back. They were wrong. If you've ever had a legal ace up your sleeve, you know there's power in patience. Daniel Hawthorne called it strategic silence. I called it letting Bradley hang himself with his own ambition. While the Sunny Shores HOA poured millions into marina expansion and marketing for their luxury resort, Daniel quietly filed a trio of legal documents that would eventually turn their dreams into legal quicksand. A quiet title action to confirm my water rights, an injunction against all commercial activity on the lake, and a petition to invalidate the HOA's construction permits, due to lack of water rights authorization. Bradley Vincent, as ever, remained blissfully unaware. At least, until the county planning office started asking uncomfortable questions. 2 weeks later, he arrived at my door, not unannounced, ambushed. His shiny black Escalade idled in my gravel driveway, and he marched up my porch steps with all the charm of a man who's used to being obeyed. "Tom," he said, fake smile tight. "Mind if I come in?" I gestured him inside, though I took some pleasure in not offering him coffee this time. He slapped a folded copy of our court filing on my table. "What is this crap about water rights? You think you can hold our entire community hostage with some 100-year-old paperwork?" "I don't think anything," I replied calmly. "The documents speak for themselves." Bradley dropped into the chair opposite mine, his polished leather shoes tapping nervously on the hardwood. "That document can't possibly be enforceable. It's ancient. And even if it was, the lake's a shared resource." I slid Daniel's legal opinion across the table, the one we'd had reviewed by 2 independent water rights experts. "Not according to Minnesota property law. And not according to the original agreement your lawyers never bothered to review." Bradley's face darkened. "Do you know how much we've invested? How many homeowners bought in because of lake access?" "I know exactly how much you've built," I said. "And I've documented every square foot." His hands clenched into fists. "What do you want? Money? A seat on the board? What's your price?" I looked him in the eye. "I want what's mine, and I want you to stop pretending it's yours." He stood so fast the chair nearly toppled. "You can't just stop us. We've got contracts, investors, guests scheduled." "I suggest you reschedule," I said, and opened the door. He didn't slam it. Too composed for that. But the tremble in his jaw said it all. For the first time, he was afraid. By the end of the week, the HOA's attorney contacted Daniel. They wanted meetings, mediation, quiet settlements. We declined. Daniel advised letting the legal filings marinate while the HOA dug themselves deeper. Meanwhile, construction accelerated. Desperation is easy to spot when you know where to look. Crews worked weekends. They started advertising lakeside weddings and boat tours online. Every new brick laid, every boat slip sold, became evidence of unauthorized commercial use. And Daniel's team recorded all of it. Then the story leaked. A local paper published a headline that spread like wildfire through the community. "Resort dreams at risk. Historic water rights threaten Sunny Shores development." The phones at HOA headquarters started ringing off the hook. Members were nervous. Contractors wanted guarantees. Some realtors began quietly removing lake access from their property listings. And that's when the offers began. First, it was a polite inquiry from a private equity group that specialized in distressed assets. Then a hotel chain reached out, one with a reputation for snapping up faltering resort properties. Word was spreading fast. The man in the weathered cabin had a stranglehold on the entire lake. And whoever controlled the water controlled the resort. What started as 6-figure offers quickly became 7, then 8. Daniel and I reviewed everyone. Most came with strings, shared rights, arbitration clauses, gradual buyouts. We passed. He kept saying, "The longer we wait, the higher the stakes get. Let them come to us." So we waited and watched. I sat on my porch the weekend of their Preview Gala, a pre-opening party for future members. Bradley had spared no expense. Floating bars, private fireworks, a catered banquet by a celebrity chef from Minneapolis. Hundreds of guests packed the new boardwalk and barge platforms. Champagne flowed, speeches were made, drones buzzed overhead. And every second of it happened on a body of water they didn't legally have the right to use. Daniel's paralegal filmed the whole thing from a kayak hidden behind the reeds. Every vendor, every banner, every boat offering lake tours to paying guests. It was a legal buffet. Bradley gave a speech near the end, full of empty promises and grand ambitions. "We're redefining lakeside living," he boomed, "a lifestyle built on access, luxury, and community." He had no idea the lifestyle was built on someone else's property. By Monday morning, Daniel's phone was ringing nonstop. More buyers, higher offers, one from a German investment group, Another from a real estate billionaire who'd once tried to buy an entire Florida beach town. Each knew the same thing. Bradley's resort was now radioactive, and I owned the only fire extinguisher. We waited one more week. Then Meridian Resort Holdings called. By the time Meridian Resort Holdings reached out, I was already rich in options but not yet in dollars. Daniel and I had spent days vetting buyers. The offers kept climbing, sure. But I wasn't just looking for the highest bid. I was looking for someone who could actually finish the job. Someone with deep pockets, deeper lawyers, and zero interest in compromising with the likes of Bradley Vincent. Meridian fit the bill. They were a global hospitality conglomerate with properties on 4 continents, a legal team the size of a football roster, and a reputation for steamrolling anyone who stood in their way. They didn't send a junior executive or a polite inquiry. They sent 2 attorneys, a valuation analyst, and an NDA thicker than a phone book. Daniel and I met them at his office, where the antique windows rattled in the spring wind as the deal took shape. They offered a figure I had to read twice, $347 million. For water, my family's lake, my lake. I'd lived most of my life with just enough. Suddenly, enough had a jet, a foundation, and its own investment advisor. The contract was airtight. Full purchase of the water rights, irrevocable, immediate. In return, Meridian received full authority to control all commercial use of Maplewood Lake, past, present, and future. They wanted bloodless power, not ongoing lawsuits. And they weren't interested in talking to Bradley Vincent. Perfect. We signed the documents in Daniel's cramped office, witnessed by a notary and a stone-faced Meridian representative who barely blinked as hundreds of millions of dollars changed direction. When the wire transfer hit my account, Daniel handed me a printed receipt. I stared at it like it was a lottery ticket made real. Then I laughed. Not just a chuckle. An unhinged, full-belly laugh that filled the room and startled the birds outside. I had just sold the water out from under a luxury resort, and now the real show was about to begin. Meridian didn't waste a second. Within 24 hours, their legal team launched a tactical blitz unlike anything the HOA had ever seen. Cease and desist letters were hand-delivered to every address affiliated with the Sunny Shores HOA. Board members, contractors, vendors, even the caterer from the preview weekend. The letters were brutally direct, effective immediately. All commercial activities taking place on Maplewood Lake are considered unauthorized and constitute trespassing on private property. Continued operation will result in legal action including, but not limited to, financial damages, injunctions, and seizure of equipment and structures. Bradley never saw it coming. The timing couldn't have been worse for him, or more perfect for me. The Sunny Shores grand opening celebration was that weekend. 200 guests were scheduled. High-end buyers from Chicago and Minneapolis had RSVP'd. Luxury vendors had already arrived. Wedding planners, investors, even real estate developers were booked to attend. And then, everything stopped. Meridian's legal notices landed like bombs. Word spread overnight through email threads, social media, HOA chat groups. Some guests pulled out. Vendors canceled. A high-profile wedding backed out 48 hours before the ceremony. Panic set in. Bradley called an emergency HOA board meeting. I attended, quietly, sat in the back, sipping a thermos of coffee like I didn't own the water under their dreams. He stood at the podium, sweating through his designer shirt, trying to hold the room together with empty bravado. "We're handling it," he said. "It's just a temporary legal challenge. Nothing's final." But the panic was already bubbling. Then Meridian's lead counsel, a woman named Iris Vale, stood up from the side of the room. She hadn't said a word the entire meeting until now. "Mr. Vincent," she said, voice calm as winter air. "Let me clarify for the record. There is no challenge. There is no ambiguity. My client now holds sole and enforceable rights to all commercial usage of Maplewood Lake. This has already been affirmed by the county and is pending confirmation by the state registrar." She paused. "All operations on the lake are to cease immediately, or we will sue you, personally and corporately, into oblivion." The room exploded. Angry homeowners shouted. One woman screamed about her daughter's upcoming wedding. A man in a golf polo threatened to sue the board. 2 board members actually left the room. And Bradley stood frozen, mouth slightly open, like he'd just stepped into traffic and seen the headlights. I quietly gathered my things and slipped out before the meeting ended. Outside, the lake was still, quiet. The construction barge bobbed gently against the half-finished marina. The fake beach was deserted. The stage, meant to host concerts and catered events, stood like an abandoned movie set. The empire was crumbling, and I had just sold the moat. Over the following days, the retreat became a rout. Vendors pulled out. Investors demanded refunds. Homeowners demanded resignations. Contractors walked off-site, citing breach of contract. Bradley tried to spin it. He released a statement claiming the HOA was in productive negotiations with the rights holder. That was news to me. Meridian issued their own statement the next day, clarifying that no such negotiations exist, nor will they. It was done. Sunny Shores Resort, the lakefront jewel of Bradley Vincent's legacy, was dead in the water. My water. The legal battle that followed wasn't a war. It was a controlled demolition. Bradley Vincent and the Sunny Shores HOA came out swinging. Emergency motions, media interviews, social media posts filled with phrases like baseless claims, frivolous litigation, and a desperate landowner stunt. They tried to cast me as a bitter hermit with a vendetta against progress. They underestimated 2 things: the strength of my claim and Meridian's legal department. Daniel Hawthorne, now joined by Meridian's senior counsel Iris Vale, responded to every filing with surgical precision. They presented an unbroken chain of documentation proving my family's uninterrupted ownership and use of the property since 1897. Every water rights statute, land deed, tax record, and historical photo reinforced the same point. The Harrington family had never relinquished control of Maplewood Lake. Bradley's defense, that the covenant was outdated, irrelevant, unenforceable under modern property law. Unfortunately for him, the courts disagreed. Within 6 weeks, a district judge issued a ruling that was as concise as it was devastating. The water rights covenant from 1897 is legally binding, has not been transferred or abandoned, and remains in full force. Any commercial use of Maplewood Lake without the expressed consent of the rights holder constitutes unlawful trespass. In other words, game over. The court ordered an immediate halt to all commercial activity on the lake. Weddings were cancelled. Marina operations shut down. Refunds had to be issued. And the resort project, already hemorrhaging money, was declared legally inoperable. But that was just the beginning. Meridian wasn't content to defend. They went on offense. Their attorneys unearthed irregularities in the HOA's operations that had nothing to do with the lake. Shady permit approvals, falsified budget allocations, even a vote to fund construction that had never been officially recorded. The lawsuits started coming from every direction. Homeowners who had invested in resort memberships filed class action claims against the board for misrepresentation. Local banks froze mortgages on properties sold with promises of lake access. Title insurers began rejecting claims. Real estate agents pulled listings. Property values plummeted. The dream that Bradley had sold everyone, of a luxury lakeside paradise, had become radioactive. The HOA fractured almost overnight. Board members resigned. Contractors sued for breach of contract. The HOA president before Bradley publicly apologized in a tearful Facebook video. And Bradley, he vanished. No press conference, no apology, just an email to the board saying he was stepping away to allow new leadership to navigate this challenge. He sold his mansion a month later for less than half of what he paid. Rumor was he left the state entirely. I sat on my porch most evenings and watched it all unfold. The event center was never completed. It was razed by Meridian within a month. The artificial beach was removed. The sand hauled away. The shoreline allowed to return to its natural state. The marina was dismantled dock by dock. The boat slips sold for scrap. What had once been a glossy, overbuilt dream was slowly being erased, returned, at least partially, to the quiet lake my grandfather had once loved. I didn't cheer. I didn't gloat. I just watched. Martha Caldwell visited again one evening in late June. She brought a bottle of wine and 2 paper cups. We sat on the porch in the orange light of sunset, the water reflecting the sky like melted gold. Your grandfather would have been proud, she said, handing me a cup. I don't know about that, I replied. He always said the lake should be left alone. He said it should be respected, Martha corrected. And that's exactly what you did. I sold it to people who saw its value, she said, who didn't think they could steal it just because you were quiet. She was right, of course. Meridian wasn't exactly a charity, but unlike Bradley, they had a plan for the lake that didn't involve squeezing every inch of shoreline for profit. Their new designs included a conservation easement around the northern cove, limited development zones, and even a small public park on the western shore. It wasn't perfect, but it was better. It was thoughtful, and it was legal. Before she left, Martha handed me a letter. They asked me to deliver this, said you'd want to read it alone. I waited until she left. Then I opened it. It was from Meridian. A lifetime lease agreement, $1 per year, for the cabin and the surrounding property. They considered it part of honoring the legacy of the original stewards of Maplewood Lake. I wouldn't have to leave. I wouldn't have to buy anything. They were giving it to me indefinitely. No strings, just respect. I stared out at the lake after reading it, the paper still in my hands. The air smelled like pine and wood smoke. Loons called across the water. Somewhere in the distance, a crane was disassembling another section of what had once been the Sunny Shores Marina. My lake, still here, still mine. If you enjoyed the story of poetic justice, vindication, and a battle over billion-dollar water rights, hit that like button and subscribe. I've got another video coming soon about the time a developer tried to condemn my friend's family farm for a shopping mall, and how that backfired just as spectacularly. And if you've got your own HOA horror story, drop it in the comments below. I read every one.